So, in this video, I want to talk about type 1 and type 2 respiratory failure. So, in type 1 respiratory failure, only the level of one gas is deranged, and in type 2 respiratory failure, the levels of both the gases is deranged. So, 1 for 1 and 2 for 2. In type 1 respiratory failure, the amount of oxygen in the body is low, but the amount of carbon dioxide in the body is normal. On the other hand, in type 2 respiratory failure, the amount of oxygen in the body is low, but the amount of carbon dioxide is also high. See, the thing is that type 2 respiratory failure, it makes sense. I mean, if the respiratory system has failed, so all the gases will be equally affected. The level of oxygen will become low, and the flush out of carbon dioxide will also decrease. So the level of carbon dioxide will become high, and the level of oxygen will become low. It is intuitive, and there is not much to explain in this. What happens is that in type 2 respiratory failure, the respiratory pump fails. So if there is some problem in the muscles or some problem in the neurons, then we have type 2 respiratory failure. Okay. What is interesting is type 1 respiratory failure. I mean, why is it so that the level of oxygen is low but the amount of carbon dioxide in the body is normal? Why does this kind of discrimination exist? This is because carbon dioxide is made up of dissimilar atoms, carbon and oxygen. So carbon dioxide has a dipole. Carbon dioxide is polar. It does not technically have a dipole because it is symmetrical, but it is polar still. So when it interacts with water, it starts to become more and more polar when it interacts with another polar molecule. On the other hand, oxygen is made up of similar atoms, which is to say that oxygen is made up of two oxygen atoms. So a dipole does not exist in oxygen. So oxygen is not polar. So oxygen is not soluble in water as much as carbon dioxide is. This is also the reason as to why we have carbonated drinks like Pepsi, Mirinda, Fanta, and all that, but we do not have oxygenated drinks. At least oxygenated drinks are not as popular as carbonated drinks, even though the amount of oxygen in the environment is much higher than the amount of carbon dioxide. This is because carbon dioxide is much more soluble in water than oxygen. So, what basically happens is that if there is accumulation of fluid in the lungs, for example, in ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, what will happen is that oxygen will not be able to cross the fluid barrier. So, oxygen will not be able to enter our body. So, the amount of oxygen in the body will become less. On the other hand, carbon dioxide, being soluble in water, will easily be able to cross the fluid barrier and will be flushed out of the body. So the amount of carbon dioxide will be normal, but the amount of oxygen will become low. So this is the basically the difference between type 1 and type 2 respiratory failure. So you can remember it in this way, that in type 1 only one of the gases is affected, in type 2 both the gases is affected. Hope you like the video. Thanks for watching.